At my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, things took a turn I'll never forget. My older brother got up, grabbed the mic, and with a grin said, "Let's raise a glass to Mom and Dad for putting up with their second son, the med school dropout who's still living in their basement at 37. And just like that, the room lit up with laughter at my expense. People actually pointed at me while they laughed like it was the joke of the year. I sat there, heat rising to my face, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my jaw while my hands trembled underneath the tablecloth. I didn't say a word, not that night, not for the next 2 months. Yesterday morning, though, my phone kept blowing up. And now I've been sitting here for nearly an hour, staring at this blank screen, trying to figure out how to even begin this story. My hands are still shaking while I type. Screw it, I'm just gonna start talking. So yeah, 2 months back, my parents hit the big 4-0. 40 years of marriage. Huge milestone, right? They rented out this decent restaurant close to where we grew up. Nothing over the top, but classy enough that folks traded their jeans for khakis and button-downs. My mom, Margaret, was in full planning mode for weeks, checking every little detail, mostly to impress her church ladies. My dad, Douglas, nodded along to everything, like he always does, pretending he had a say. Truth is, I almost bailed on the whole thing. I genuinely thought about faking a stomach bug or some emergency. Being the family screw-up gets real old when you're surrounded by people who treat you like a cautionary tale. Still, I showed up because, well, 40 years is a big deal. And underneath all the awkwardness and judgment, I do love my parents. Quick context, I'm 35. Yes, I live in the basement. And yeah, I dropped out of med school 8 years ago after what my therapist nicely calls a major mental health episode. Let's be honest, it was a total breakdown, right in the middle of finals. Since then, I've been working at a local hardware store, trying to piece my life back together. Not exactly living the dream, but hey, I'm not strung out, I'm not behind bars, and I pay rent to my parents, so there's that. Now my brother, Grant, whole different story. Golden child. Can't seem to lose. He runs his own financial advisory firm, lives in a massive house in the ritzy part of town, married to Sienna, who's got something like 50,000 followers on Instagram. Her whole feed is curated around their authentic family journey. Total eye roll? They've got 2 kids who are probably already pre-enrolled at Harvard. The night started off okay. People were mingling, sipping wine, nibbling on those little appetizers that taste like air. I stuck to a corner with a beer in hand, chatting with my cousin, the only one who talks to me like I'm just a regular guy. I caught Mom looking at me a few times across the room. Her expression was a mix of glad you showed up and please don't do anything weird. I know that look. I've seen it all my life. After dinner, my dad stood up and gave a speech about marriage and commitment and all that. Predictable, sentimental stuff. Mom teared up right on cue. Everyone clapped at the appropriate moments. Just like a Hallmark movie. And then Grant stood up. Grabbed the mic with that toothpaste commercial smile of his, the one that probably cost more than my entire monthly paycheck. He said, "Mind if I say a few words?" And of course, all eyes turned to him. Because they always do. He started going on about family values and the lessons our parents taught us. I tuned him out until he suddenly turned his gaze straight toward me. "Let's give it up for Mom and Dad," he said, "for their patience with their second son, the one who dropped out of med school and still lives in their basement at 35. And the whole room lost it. Everyone laughed. I mean everyone. Someone even pointed like I was a character in a sitcom. Then more fingers followed. Mom made the face where she's pretending to be annoyed, but you can tell she thinks it's funny. Dad just stared down at his plate. My cousin leaned in and muttered, "That's messed up," but didn't say it loud enough for anyone else to hear. What happened after that is a bit of a blur. My face felt like it was on fire. Under the table, my hands were shaking so badly I pressed them against my legs just to keep still. Someone patted me on the back like we were all sharing some big inside joke. I managed to stretch my face into the fakest smile I've ever worn while Grant wrapped up his comedy routine with something about family always sticking together. The rest of the night? Just a mess of dodging people and counting the minutes. At one point, I locked myself in the bathroom and scrolled Reddit for 20 minutes just to escape. I remember one of Mom's church friends asking if I had any prospects, like I was some charity case, eyes full of pity. I also remember seriously wondering what would happen if I just accidentally spilled my drink on Grant's overpriced loafers. When the party ended, everyone else stuck around for the after party. I left. Got to my car, shut the door, and just screamed. Like, full-on guttural scream, the kind that probably had nearby pedestrians calling security. Then came the tears. The ugly, uncontrollable kind. The kind I hadn't let out since the day I walked away from med school. I sobbed and slammed the steering wheel again and again until my arms went numb. But here's the thing, this wasn't new. Grant's been humiliating me for as long as I can remember. As kids, he'd wait until we had company to mention how I wet the bed until I was 9. In high school, he'd drop casual reminders about my college rejection letters whenever his friends were around. When I finally got into med school, he joked that I'd probably kill someone during my first rotation. It's always been like this. And my parents? Their response has always been the same, a sad smile, a quiet pat on the shoulder, and that look that says, "We love you anyway." Which really just means we're disappointed, but we won't say it out loud. They've never stood up for me. Not once. I got home before they did and just collapsed onto my bed, staring blankly at the basement ceiling. Let's be honest, calling it an apartment is a stretch. It's a finished basement with a bathroom and zero sunlight. Later, I heard them all come home, still laughing, still chatting. Mom peeked in to check on me, but I pretended to be asleep. That night, I made a decision. Something had to change. Not some vague, Hollywood-style revenge fantasy. I mean something real. The very next morning was Sunday brunch, Mom's sacred weekly tradition. Normally, I'd skip it with some excuse, but that day, I showed up. I needed to see Grant's smug face in the daylight. Needed to remind myself why I was so angry. That's when I overheard something that stopped me cold. I was grabbing a glass of orange juice from the fridge when I heard Grant out back on the deck, talking with his business partner, Corbin. They didn't know I was nearby. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough for me to catch every word. "The Johnson account is getting messy," Corbin was saying. "The old man's daughter is asking questions about where the money's been going." Grant replied, calm as ever. "She's confused by the paperwork. Just push the meeting until after the Williams transfer clears. We'll cover it then," he added, like it was no big deal. "And if she brings in a lawyer like she threatened?" Corbin asked. Grant scoffed. "Jesus, Corbin, do I have to think of everything? Tell her I'm taking a personal day. Say it's a family emergency or something. We just need 2 more weeks." It didn't sit right. Even with my limited financial knowledge, shuffling money between accounts like that to cover gaps sounded shady as hell. I quietly slipped my phone out of my pocket and hit record. They kept talking for another 10 minutes about asset transfers, temporary holdings, all kinds of financial lingo that sounded more and more illegal the longer I listened. When I made my way back into the dining room, Grant shot me that same smug grin he wore at the anniversary party. Well, look who's decided to rejoin the living," he quipped, and like trained seals, everyone chuckled. I didn't say a word. Just stared at him. Something had shifted. I saw him differently now. After brunch, I did something I hadn't done in years. I grabbed my laptop and headed to a local coffee shop. I sat there for hours, sipping overpriced lattes and diving deep into financial laws, investment advisor guidelines, and ethics violations. 7 hours and 6 coffees later, I had enough confirmation to make my gut churn. Grant was knee-deep in some seriously sketchy financial behavior. Curious, I also pulled up Sienna's Instagram. Her feed was filled with picture-perfect snapshots of their family, all filtered smiles and #blessed captions. But underneath the gloss, there were cracks. Little hints, really. Snarky captions about being present, friends commenting things like, "hang in there," the kind of stuff people post when their world's unraveling but they still want to look like they have it all together. That week, I went full detective mode. Being the invisible basement dweller had its perks. Nobody questions what I do with my time. Nobody even noticed I spent entire days online, quietly connecting dots. Turned out Grant had been siphoning funds from elderly clients, using their money to chase risky investments and cover other losses. He was overpromising returns he couldn't possibly deliver. Textbook Ponzi-like scam. And as if that wasn't enough, I found out he was cheating on Sienna with someone from his gym. I discovered that through some very explicit DMs I stumbled on after borrowing his tablet while he was doing laps in Mom and Dad's pool. I could have blown the whole thing up right then. Sent everything to the internet. Called every client. Walked into Sienna's kitchen and handed her the proof. But I didn't. Because some part of me wasn't interested in just justice, I wanted retribution. I wanted him to feel exposed, humiliated, utterly cornered. Exactly the way I felt at that party. So I started planning. Carefully. Methodically. Like I used to back in med school before my mind fell apart. I built a timeline. Compiled files. Tracked his patterns. Looked for cracks in his armor. And for once, being the forgotten son worked to my advantage. Nobody batted an eye when I snapped photos of papers he left lying around. Nobody questioned my sudden interest in financial news or my constant time on the laptop. It's been 2 months now. 2 months of playing along at family dinners, nodding and smiling while Grant continued tossing little jabs about my potential. 2 months of laying the groundwork. And now it's finally time. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my public shaming. And wouldn't you know it, Grant's receiving an award at some big industry event. All the important people will be there. Clients, colleagues, local media. Sienna's already hyping it up online, posting sneak peeks of her outfit and tagging the venue. Mom and Dad? Bursting with pride. Telling everyone at church. Everything's in place. All the emails are prepped. Evidence is organized and scheduled to land right in the laps of his firm, his clients, and his shiny industry friends. I keep hearing his voice in my head. Let's toast to Mom and Dad for their patience with their second son. Only this time, the memory doesn't make my hands tremble. It makes me grin. Because by this time tomorrow, Grant's golden image is going to crash and burn in the most spectacular way possible. And I'll be sitting front row with a glass of champagne, the same kind they were drinking the night they all laughed at me. I'll post an update once the dust settles. Wish me luck. Reddit. TLDR. My perfect big brother humiliated me at our parents' anniversary party. I found out he's scamming his clients and cheating on his wife. Instead of outing him right away, I spent 2 months building the perfect plan to ruin his life in front of everyone. Big reveal is tomorrow. Stay tuned. Update 1. First off, holy hell. I didn't expect this post to blow up the way it did. Thanks for all the support, the comments, the DMs. Seriously. For everyone wondering if I actually went through with it, this should clear things up. The morning after I posted the first part, I woke up to my mom knocking softly on my door. She had made blueberry pancakes, my favorite. Said she was just checking in because I'd been acting a little different lately. Translation. She was afraid I was spiraling again like I did back in med school. Honestly, her timing couldn't have been better. I did what I've always done best, played the part. The slightly broken but hopeful son. I told her I'd been feeling better than I had in years. That I was applying for jobs. Thinking about getting my own place soon. Her whole face lit up like someone flipped a switch. For a second, I almost felt bad about what I was planning. Almost. Here's the truth about being the family disappointment. People stop paying close attention. They check in just enough to feel good about themselves, but they don't really look. It's like I became invisible, but still in plain sight. And I've been using that invisibility like a damn superpower. The week after the party, I established a routine. Mornings at the library where I used the public computers instead of my own. Shout out to the commenter who warned me about traceable IP addresses. Afternoons at the hardware store, same as always. Evenings were supposedly for job applications. In reality, I was deep in the rabbit hole, building my case against Grant from my basement hideout. Nobody questioned it. It fit the version of me they were used to, trying but still a mess. My first real move? Reaching out to Sienna. That one was tricky. We've never been close. She's always looked at me like I'm some stray dog her husband keeps around out of obligation. But I had noticed something over the last year. At dinners, she kept talking about these stress headaches. And see, the thing is, I didn't drop out of med school because I was dumb. I cracked under the weight of depression and anxiety, yeah, but I'd been doing well until that point. I actually was good at the doctor stuff. So one day, I accidentally bumped into her at Target. She was in the pharmacy aisle looking through pain meds. I casually brought up how ibuprofen, if overused, can cause rebound headaches, and suggested a better combination for her symptoms. She blinked, a little surprised at the medical advice coming from her husband's deadbeat brother. That small moment led to coffee. Coffee turned into texts. Within 2 weeks, I'd become her unofficial health consultant. She started opening up not just about the headaches, but about other stuff too. She started confiding in me more about how draining it was to keep up her carefully curated social media presence, how overwhelmed the kids were with their jam-packed schedules, and how Grant seemed to be working later and later each night. I played the role flawlessly. A compassionate, non-judgmental ear. Just her brother-in-law with no job, no pressure, all the time in the world to listen from the comfort of his subterranean existence. And man, every conversation was a treasure trove. I didn't record a thing, but my memory? Sharp as ever. I held on to every word. Meanwhile, I was digging into Grant's business. That part was trickier. I couldn't just waltz into his office and start poking around. So I got creative. Family gatherings became my little recon missions. I'd casually bring up investment topics during dinner, tossing out innocent questions about market trends. Once, I even pretended I was thinking about investing the whopping few $100 in my savings account. Got him talking for 20 straight minutes about his client philosophy and how he handles risk. The big break came when I offered to help my parents fix their computer. Dad had been complaining for weeks that his emails weren't coming through right. While I was troubleshooting, I set up a filter to forward any messages from Grant to a burner account I created. Shady? Maybe. But I wasn't editing or fabricating anything. I was just quietly watching what Grant was already sending. And that's when I stumbled on something big. Grant was dipping into my parents' retirement accounts. Not asking for help. Not loans. He was literally moving their money around, money he managed for them, into his business to cover shortfalls. His emails were full of clever phrasing and vague reassurances, but the implication was clear. He was burning through their nest egg to keep his operation afloat. 3 weeks into all this, I hit gold again. Grant had left his laptop at the house after rushing out post-dinner. And miracle of miracles, he hadn't logged out. I had maybe 20 minutes tops before someone noticed. My hands were shaking, but I moved fast. Forwarded key emails to my burner. Snapped screenshots of his calendar. That's when I came across messages between Grant and someone named Jordan. At first, I assumed she was a client. She wasn't. The emails started off formal, then friendly, then unmistakably romantic, and then downright explicit. I felt disgusting reading them, but also vindicated. Mr. Picture Perfect family man was hooking up with a coworker behind his influencer wife's back. But that wasn't even the worst of it. His calendar revealed he'd been scheduling regular meetings with the same small group of elderly clients, the Barretts, the Shepherds, the Kennedys, and Mrs. DeLuca. After cross-checking names and emails, it all added up. These were his biggest fish. Wealthy retirees whose accounts he was using to plug holes elsewhere. Exactly the kind of sketchy shell game I suspected from the start. Ponzi adjacent at best. Straight-up fraud at worst. By the end of the second month, I had enough to absolutely destroy him. But I wasn't done. I wanted to understand why. Why did he always need to put me down to make himself feel taller? Why did our parents let it slide every single time? So I started probing carefully. Not accusations, just casual comments here and there. I asked Mom if she thought Grant had been more tense lately. I told Dad I overheard him arguing on the phone, sounding stressed about money. Little breadcrumbs just to see what they'd say. The answers were revealing and painful. Mom told me that when we were younger, Grant was always secretly jealous of how easily school came to me. That teachers used to tell her I was the one with real potential. Dad, more reluctantly, admitted Grant had gotten buried under student loans and made a few big investment missteps early in his career. Losses he tried to recover from by taking riskier bets. They weren't defending him exactly, but they were explaining him. And in doing so, they admitted something else. They knew Grant could be cruel to me. They just didn't deal with it. Because that would have meant acknowledging that their perfect son wasn't so perfect. That conversation happened 2 weeks ago. It left me feeling hollow but also clearer than ever about what I needed to do. This wasn't just about Grant anymore. It was about finally making our parents face the truth they'd been sweeping under the rug for decades. The final phase came down to 3 steps. First, I created 3 separate evidence packages. One for my parents, packed with documentation showing how Grant had been siphoning their retirement funds. One for Sienna with just enough messages and screenshots to confirm the affair, nothing too graphic, just the cold, undeniable truth. And one for Grant's business partners and top clients, a detailed breakdown of how he'd been juggling funds and mismanaging accounts. Second, I set up a fake job interview in a town 2 hours away. It was scheduled for the exact morning of Grant's big award ceremony, giving me the perfect excuse for being MIA when everything blew sky high. Mom was over the moon about the interview. She didn't question a thing. And third, I had the hardest talk I've ever had with my parents. Last night, I sat them down and told them what Grant had been doing with their money. I didn't lay everything out, just enough to make them look at the facts. Mom cried. Dad went quiet after his initial anger. They didn't want to believe it, but I showed them the transfers, the statements, the emails. They had no argument. I gave them a choice. They could confront him before the ceremony or stay silent and let the storm hit in public. Either way, it was coming. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just stated the facts and walked away. And for the first time in my adult life, I saw something different in their eyes. Not pity. Not disappointment. Just something that looked a lot like respect. This morning, I packed a small bag and left early for my interview. I set the emails to go out at exactly 2 p.m., right as Grant would be on stage. As I grabbed my keys, I heard my parents upstairs arguing. Dad wanted to call Grant immediately. Mom wanted to wait until the award was over. Neither of them had any idea just how big the explosion was going to be. I drove to a coffee shop in the next town, ordered a large black coffee, opened my laptop, and waited. At 2 o'clock sharp, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. First came a text from Sienna, just a row of question marks. Then missed calls from my parents. Then Grant. Then Grant again. And again. I didn't answer a single one. Just watched the storm roll in. At 2:15, Sienna went live on Instagram from the award venue. She was crying, mascara running, hands shaking, as she talked about betrayal and lies to her audience of 50,000 followers. In the background, you could see Grant trying to grab her phone while everyone else just stared. By 2:30, Grant's business partner, Corbin, was calling me too. Funny thing, Corbin had never called me in my life. Not once. But there he was, lighting up my screen like we were old friends. At the same time, my Google alerts for Grant, last name, started pinging nonstop. Somebody at the ceremony had started live tweeting the chaos as it unraveled. So here I am, still parked in the same booth at that coffee shop, sipping cold coffee and watching the whole thing unravel from a comfortable distance. Grant's perfect little empire is collapsing in real time, and all I had to do was open the blinds and let in the light. And yet, I don't feel the way I thought I would. There's satisfaction, sure. A kind of quiet triumph. But there's also this weight sitting heavy in my chest. It's not regret exactly. It's more the realization that this doesn't erase anything. It doesn't undo years of being the black sheep. Doesn't fix the damage or silence all the ghosts. But it's something. A beginning, maybe. My phone won't stop vibrating. At some point, I should probably pick up. But right now, I'm just watching the notifications climb, thinking about what Grant's going through on the other side of that screen. Is he trembling the way I did when they all laughed at me? Is he gritting his teeth, trying to fake a smile while the walls cave in? God, I hope so. I'll post another update once I make it back and start dealing with whatever storm's waiting. This is just the beginning. TLDR spent 2 months gathering dirt on my brother, his affair, his financial scams. Orchestrated a controlled detonation during his big award ceremony. Watching it all fall apart now. Final update. I didn't sleep last night. Not even a minute. Just laid in bed, phone in hand, watching notifications roll in like wreckage after a shipwreck. 38 missed calls. 63 text messages. The digital fallout of the nuke I'd been quietly assembling for weeks. Around 5 a.m., I finally shut my phone off completely. Sat in the dark motel room, yeah, I didn't go home after the coffee shop, I'm not that naive, and just breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could actually breathe. Not happiness, not exactly. But a sense of space. Of finally having room to exist without being buried under the label of disappointment. At 9 a.m., I turned my phone back on. There were 6 new voicemails from Grant. Each one worse than the last. By the final message, all I could hear was ragged breathing and what sounded like sobbing. A twisted part of me wanted to make it my new ringtone. The rest of me just felt hollow. My parents had sent a flurry of texts asking if I was okay where I was when I was coming home. Not a single word about what had happened. Classic Margaret and Douglas. Ignore the smoldering crater in the living room and ask if anyone wants pancakes. The message that caught me off guard? Sienna. 3 words, we need to talk. No fury. No blame. Just that, like she was extending a hand in a minefield. I scrolled through a few messages from people who'd been at the ceremony. Apparently, Grant tried to snatch Sienna's phone during her Instagram livestream. Ended up knocking over a water glass. Corbin, his business partner, had to hold him back while the entire crowd watched in stunned silence. Clients, colleagues, everyone was buzzing, trying to make sense of the meltdown. I took a shower, packed my bag, checked out of the motel. Then I just sat in my car for 20 minutes, unsure of where to go. Home didn't feel right. Not yet. I ended up at this old diner near campus, the one where I used to study during med school. Ordered eggs and coffee. Tried to pretend I was just a regular guy grabbing breakfast. And then the phone rang again. It was Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me shifted. I wasn't hiding anymore. I answered. She was crying before I could say a word. Voice shaky, panicked. Grant had been arrested. Arrested. That wasn't part of the plan. Turns out one of his elderly clients had received my email and immediately called the police. Apparently, Grant was already on their radar for financial inconsistencies. All they'd needed was hard evidence. I delivered it in a neat little package. Mom kept asking me if I knew this would happen, if this was what I really wanted. She kept repeating, "Why would you do this to the family?" Not once did she ask why Grant had done it. I let her talk herself into silence. Then I said I'd be home soon and we could talk more then. The drive back felt unreal. Like I was outside myself, watching someone else turn the wheel. I kept waiting for guilt, for regret. It never came. What came instead was a strange calm. A quiet knowing that I'd done what needed to be done. When I pulled into the driveway, Dad was waiting out front. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight, shoulders slumped, face pale. He didn't say a word, just held the door open and motioned me inside. Mom was at the kitchen table, surrounded by tissues and scrolling through messages. Family friends already knew. News travels fast when you live in a town where everyone goes to the same church and the same grocery store. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, Dad spoke. Asked me why I hadn't come to them with all this information. Why I went public. Why I had to destroy everything in one day. I laughed. Couldn't help it. I asked if he remembered the anniversary party. Remembered Grant humiliating me in front of a room full of family and friends. If he remembered all the years he and Mom sat there while Grant took shot after shot at me, never stepping in. Mom started crying again. Dad stared down at his hands like they were someone else's. And that's when it hit me, they weren't angry about what I'd done. They were angry that I'd forced them to see it. Everything they'd ignored. Everything they'd allowed. I was about to say something else when the front door slammed open. Grant. His shirt wrinkled, tie half off, hair a mess. Eyes wild like he hadn't slept in days. He saw me and came at me. Full charge. Dad barely managed to grab him before he got to me. Grant was screaming about how I'd ruined his life, how I'd always been jealous, how I'd never be anything. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I just looked him straight in the eyes and said, at least I never stole from old people or cheated on my wife. And that was it. He broke. Collapsed against Dad, sobbing, muttering that it wasn't supposed to happen like this. That he just needed more time. That Jordan didn't even mean anything. That he felt trapped by the picture-perfect life everyone expected him to maintain. And right then, watching him fall apart on the kitchen floor, it hit me. He was just as messed up as I was. Maybe worse. The only difference? He'd been better at hiding it. Mom tried to turn the moment into some kind of family therapy session. Made us sit down. Poured tea nobody touched. Like we were squabbling kids who'd fought over the last cookie, not adults in the middle of a complete emotional implosion. The whole thing was so absurd I almost burst out laughing again. Grant refused to even look at me. Every word he said was directed at our parents, like I wasn't even in the room. He kept rambling about how he could fix it, how he'd hire the best lawyer, make things right with Sienna, rebuild his career and his reputation. But then Dad cut him off. Just raised his hand and said, quietly but firmly, "That's enough, Grant." And for the first time in my life, I heard my father speak to the golden child without even a trace of admiration. "You stole from us," he said. "From your clients. You lied to everyone." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. "I'm outside." I excused myself and walked out to the front porch. She was sitting in that oversized luxury SUV of hers, sunglasses hiding what I guessed were swollen eyes. I got in. We didn't say anything at first. Just sat there, letting the silence settle. Then she handed me her phone. It was a text thread between her and Grant from months back. She had confronted him about the affair. He gaslit her, made her question herself, made her feel like she was the problem. Classic. She wasn't crying now. No yelling either. Just this eerie calm. Like someone who's been drowning for months and has finally stopped struggling. She asked what else I knew. What other secrets he'd been hiding. So I told her everything. The financial manipulation. The fake returns. The shifting client funds. All of it. By the time I was done, she just nodded. Like someone hearing a final diagnosis they already knew was coming. Before I left the car, she turned to me and said something I didn't expect. "Thank you." She thanked me for detonating her marriage. Said she'd been questioning her own reality for so long. She thought she was losing her mind. Said that no matter how painful it was, the truth was better than living a lie. When I stepped back inside the house, Grant was gone. Mom said he left to talk to his lawyer. Dad was on the phone with the bank, trying to make sense of what was left of their retirement. I went down to my basement room and started packing a small bag. Not everything, just enough for a few days. I needed air. Needed to be somewhere else while my brain sorted through the wreckage. As I zipped up the bag, I heard footsteps. Dad stood in the doorway to the room I'd been living in far too long. He looked lost, like a man who had just realized the foundation of everything he believed in was cracked all along. He asked me where I was going. I told him I wasn't sure yet, just that I couldn't stay here right now. And then, out of nowhere, he apologized. Not just for that day, not just for the anniversary, but for everything. For years of letting Grant treat me like garbage. For failing both his sons in different ways. It wasn't some big dramatic movie moment. He didn't cry, didn't try to hug me. He just stood there, this tired, broken man, finally saying what needed to be said. I nodded. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet. But I could see the effort it took to admit that much. That was yesterday. This morning, I woke up in yet another motel room. I checked my phone and saw that the fallout was still unraveling in real time. Grant's company had issued a formal statement saying he'd been temporarily relieved of his duties, pending an internal investigation. Sienna had filed for emergency custody of the kids. I spent most of the day ignoring calls, just staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what happens next. The revenge part? That's done. But the victory I imagined? It doesn't feel like I thought it would. What I feel instead is this strange emptiness. Like I've been running for so long. I didn't even realize I crossed the finish line until I was standing in silence, with nothing left to chase. But one thing is clear. I can't go back. Not to the basement. Not to the version of me that lived down there. That guy, the med school dropout, the family joke, the invisible disappointment, he's gone. He died the day I decided to stop taking it. I just got off the phone with my cousin, the only one who's ever treated me like a real person. He offered me his spare room while I figure things out. Told me he was proud of me. Said sure, the way I went about it was nuclear-level petty, but also kind of badass. Made me laugh for the first time in days. Grant texted me once today, "I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond, because honestly, there's nothing left to say. Mom keeps sending me links to family therapy groups. Dad hasn't reached out at all. The family group chat that used to buzz with Grant's accomplishments and my invisible existence is silent for the first time in years. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if we'll ever come back from this as a family, or if we even should. I don't know if Grant will face real consequences or if money and status will shield him one more time. But I do know this. I'm not shaking anymore. My hands are steady as I type this. And that man they used to call the family disappointment? He's gone. Now I'm someone else. Someone who fought back. And for now, maybe that's enough. TLDR, after exposing my brother's crimes, watching him get arrested, confronting my parents, and hearing my sister-in-law thank me for revealing the truth, I'm leaving home and starting over. The basement is behind me. I'm figuring out who I am now that I finally stood up for myself.